none of us can truly imagine what a battle in ancient times looked like. Modern films try to bring us as close as possible to that reality, and massive battles are often the highlight of these movies. We see the clash of armies, the sound of swords, the chaos of combat, and the heroic deeds of warriors. But then the film ends. The victors celebrate, the defeated retreat. But what happens next? Battlefields were left littered with thousands of fallen soldiers, broken weapons, shattered armor, and blood-soaked earth. Who was responsible for cleaning up this grim legacy of war? How were the dead buried? What happened to the equipment of the fallen? And what rules applied to prisoners? Cleaning the battlefield was an unpleasant yet essential part of war, and often just as harrowing as the battle itself. Burial of the dead. The presence of dead bodies on battlefields posed a significant problem. Decomposing corpses caused unbearable stench and posed serious health risks. Burial practices varied depending on the period, culture, and circumstances of the battle. Battles were also interrupted for the purpose of burial, as seen during the Peloponnesian War. In this conflict between Athens and Sparta, it was common for fighting to pause briefly so that both sides could retrieve and bury their fallen. Such truces occurred, for example, after the Battle of Delium, 424 BCE, where the Thebans initially refused to return the bodies of the Athenians. However, after diplomatic negotiations, they eventually agreed to do so. In ancient civilizations such as Rome and Greece, burying the dead was a key part of war ethics. The Greeks, for example, believed that the souls of fallen warriors who were not properly buried would never find peace. As a result, victors often ensured their dead were given an honorable burial, while the defeated might be left to their fate. The Romans also organized mass graves for their fallen legionnaires, as evidenced by archaeological excavations in ancient battlefields, where remains have been found along with weapons and armor. Some high-ranking soldiers were even given individual graves with tombstones. In contrast, cultures like the Indians or Vikings practiced cremation, believing in purification by fire and the quick elimination of health hazards. Clearing the battlefield was both a physically and emotionally demanding task, often assigned to prisoners, local civilians, or specialized military units. If fallen soldiers were left to decay in the open, battle sites could quickly become breeding grounds for disease, with catastrophic consequences. In some cases, epidemics caused by decomposing bodies claimed more lives than the battles themselves. For example, after the 30 Years' War, massive outbreaks of plague spread in areas where bodies were not buried in time. Similar issues arose after the Battle of Gettysburg during the American Civil War, where swift burial was necessary to prevent the spread of infection. In the Middle Ages, in addition to burials, fires were sometimes used to disinfect battlefields, especially in densely populated cities. Soldiers were also required to wash their hands and use vinegar as a primitive disinfectant after handling the dead. Cleaning up after battle was not just a matter of respect for the fallen, but also a crucial strategic and hygienic measure. Despite being a gruesome and thankless task, it played a vital role in restoring normal life after war. Weapons and war trophies. The weapons and equipment of fallen soldiers were considered valuable resources after battle. Warriors and local inhabitants knew the worth of armor, swords, and shields, and battlefields often turned into swarms of scavengers searching for loot. Weapons were expensive to produce, so they were rarely left behind. Even damaged equipment was repaired or melted down to create new weapons. For example, in early medieval times, spoils of war were used to forge new weapons, making them both practical and strategically important. Weapons and banners of the defeated were also collected as war trophies. These items were displayed in temples or castles as proof of military prowess. The Romans, for instance, decorated their triumphal arches with enemy weapons. Personal belongings such as jewelry, coins, or amulets were also gathered by soldiers or local looters. This practice was sometimes seen as an unofficial war bonus, providing an opportunity for wealth if valuable items were found. As a result, within days after a battle, the battlefield was often completely stripped of anything useful. Prisoners of war. If soldiers were captured after battle, it was often a fortunate outcome for the victors. Prisoners were frequently used for hard labor, such as rebuilding infrastructure, cleaning up after battle, or digging mass graves. In ancient times, where slavery was common, captured soldiers represented an important source of cheap labor. After battles like those in Carthage or during Roman expansions, prisoners were sold into slavery or distributed among victorious soldiers. For example, after the Romans conquered Carthage, they sold tens of thousands of surviving inhabitants into slavery. Some prisoners were also forced to fight as gladiators in Roman arenas. Egyptian armies often captured enemies to use as laborers on construction projects. In certain cases, captured artisans or scholars were spared and integrated into the victor's society if their skills were deemed valuable. Many high-status prisoners were held for ransom. On the other hand, some prisoners were brutally executed to intimidate enemies and break their morale. A lasting impact. The cleanup of battlefields was more than just a practical necessity. It had long-term effects on societies, economies, and warfare itself. The way fallen soldiers were buried, weapons were salvaged, and prisoners were treated shaped history in ways that extended far beyond the battlefield. Psychologically, handling the remains of war was deeply traumatic, leaving scars on those responsible for the cleanup. Economically, war-torn lands often became uninhabitable or were stripped of valuable resources. Strategically, the treatment of the dead influenced morale and even future conflicts. Some armies prioritized retrieving their fallen, while others used unburied corpses as a tool of psychological warfare. Even today, remnants of past battles still surface, reminding us that war doesn't end with the last strike of a sword or gunfire. It lingers in history, memory, and the very soil beneath our feet. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to let me know in the comments, and maybe leave a like and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, but it really means a lot to me. See you in the next video.